Aloha, you're listening to Chad Ford's NBA Big Board on the Locked On Podcast Network. College basketball season equals NBA draft season. I've got my first Big Board 1.0, ranking the top 30 prospects in the 2022 NBA draft, coming right now. Aloha, you're listening to Chad Ford's NBA Big Board on the Locked On Podcast Network. College basketball season starts on November 9th. I'm stoked. Been talking to a lot of NBA scouts, NBA GMs, building up my first big board of the year. That's my top 30 prospects in the NBA draft based off of talking to NBA scouts and general managers about who they think are going to be the best prospects overall in 2020 NBA draft. You can read the entire big board over at my newsletter and website, NBABigBoard.com. Give us your email, subscribe today. You can get that big board and all of our draft coverage right into your email. We'll do some scouting reports. We'll be covering all the big games on Tuesday the 9th as well. There's just so much good stuff that's coming our way right now for the NBA draft. I'm stoked to get talking about it right away. Just a couple of things. Look, my big board is a ranking based off of intel from NBA scouts and executives. It's not a mock draft. I'm not trying to place these players with specific teams. Those mock drafts typically come later for me once I start to have some idea of what the draft order is going to look like and starting to get intel from NBA teams about who they might be interested in drafting. And so this is just a pure ranking based on talent. I assume that every player that is draft eligible, that means they're going to be 19 by the end of the 2022 calendar year, will declare for the draft. And in my experience, most of those players actually do. We're going to see some significant fluctuation as the season begins. I went back and looked at my 2021 big board 1.0 as well. 7 of the top 10 guys ended up being drafted in the top 10, but there was one guy, Daishen Nix, who ended up not getting drafted at all, and another guy, Greg Brown, who slipped into the second round. And so there's going to be some fluctuation here, but I think some of these guys at the top are going to be pretty solid. The other thing I'll say about this particular 2022 draft is there's a lot of talent and a lot of it is with big men, which is sort of problematic for NBA scouts because the league has been shying away from prominently featuring big men or drafting them early. And you've got a number of guys that really project as NBA fours or centers in the league. So that's one problem. The other one is that while there's a lot of talent in this draft and players that NBA scouts really like, I'm not sure that they are as excited about this draft as they were the top of the 2021 draft that had Cade Cunningham and Evan Mobley and Jalen Green and Scotty Barnes and Jalen Suggs and Jonathan Kuminga and Josh Giddey. We talk about sort of tier 1 prospects being guys with a ceiling of being a top 10 prospect, an absolute superstar in the NBA someday. And then tier 2 prospects, which are guys who can make an all-star team, which is really sort of trending out to be like the top 30 or so players in the NBA. And right now, there's no teams that are pegging any of these prospects as tier 1 prospects right now. They're all pegged at tier 2, where we had Cade Cunningham, Evan Mobley, and Jalen Green pegged as tier 1 prospects, with Scotty Barnes and Jalen Suggs pegged and Jonathan Kuminga pegged as tier 2 prospects last year. So maybe not quite as high at the top. There's a lot of depth in this draft. Really excited to get started. And it starts with there's no consensus number 1 pick this year. Like in years past, we've sometimes had a guy that came in really the heavily favorite to be the number 1 pick in 2021. That guy, I think, was clearly Cade Cunningham. He stayed at number 1 on our board all year. I'm not sure we're going to be able to say the same about that this year because there is a significant difference in talking to NBA scouts about which guy they like at the top. But the guy that had the most votes, at least from the teams that I was talking to, was Chet Holmgren, the Gonzaga forward/center freshman, who is a really unique prospect. It's actually one of the most unique prospects that I've ever really encountered covering the draft, and I've covered the draft for a really long time. He's 7 feet. He's 195 pounds, so sort of the body of Poku, has a 7'6" wingspan, which is tremendous, and plays really like a guard at times on offense, but is an excellent rebounder and rim protector on defense. And I think when you're seeing what Evan Mobley is doing right now for Cleveland, you can get a glimpse of maybe what teams are hoping Holmgren can become, because he's got elite size, he's got the length, he's got mobility, he's got the skill set of a guard, and he just is a really unique player. In fact, I'll take it a step further. As far as just pure perimeter skill set goes, I think Holmgren's actually ahead of where Evan Mobley was at the same age as a college freshman, which I think is really interesting. He's also, believe it or not, 20 pounds skinnier than Evan Mobley was coming in to USC as well. And so if one of the concerns for Mobley has and probably will continue to be strength, it's even a bigger concern for Holmgren. One of the things I will say about Holmgren, though, is he's skinny, but he's not soft. He's wiry, tough. He's very aggressive. He has a high motor. He likes to play defense. And this is just really a question of, what is he in the NBA at his size? I think it's more likely, especially with Drew Timme on this team, that he's going to be a 4 in the NBA. And maybe he has the ball handling skills, the lateral quickness, the shooting ability to maybe play some 3 at some point in the NBA. I love him. I love watching him play. He is a really unique player. I'm not sure how much strength he's actually going to be able to put on that frame, which I think is a legitimate question mark for him. But, right now he's my number one prospect, though certainly not the consensus number one prospect in the draft right now. Trending right next to him is Paulo Bencaro, the Duke big man, who's also a freshman, 6'10", 250 pounds with a 7-foot wingspan. You really, if you could combine Banchero's body with Holmgren's, skill set, you'd probably have the perfect prospect, because this guy is built like a tank already. He has an NBA body. He's got that NBA strength, and like Chet, he's really highly skilled. He can do a bit of everything. He can shoot, he can pass, he can defend, and he is going to be able to hold his own in the paint in ways that Chet really can't. He doesn't have elite length. His wingspan, for example, is 6 inches shorter than Chet. He doesn't have elite athleticism. This is not a jump out of the gym type of player, and not elite lateral quickness. He's not a bad athlete, but there are some teams that worry that sort of over time, as he gets heavier and he looks like he has a heavier build, especially on his base, will some of that explosiveness and quickness leave him? I think that the one thing you can say about Banchero is that he is going to be maybe the most dominant freshman as far as statistics go. He is going to be an absolute monster, I think, at Duke as a freshman. I expect him to put up big numbers right away and do that the whole year. Duke's got a really loaded team, and so this is going to be a team like Gonzaga, who is going to be in the mix, for national championship as well. But I think when we're just sort of looking at like overall production, he's already has the size and strength of an NBA player. I think that's going to make him dominant in college. They've been raving about him out of Duke. He has a great feel for the game as well. And I just think that he doesn't quite have the length and athletic upside that Chet Holmgren does. But he also has he also doesn't have some of the downsides of Chet as well, because again, strength is going to be an issue for Chet in a big way, and may limit his ability to perform, especially in the post. And so a lot of NBA guys prefer Banchero. They think he's the safest pick in this draft. And I think that's probably the right way to sort of frame these two together. One maybe with a little bit higher ceiling and upside and a sort of unique factor, and one that just looks like he's going to have, like an Al Horford-esque career in the NBA. And maybe that's sort of the type of prospect that ultimately he becomes. And certainly a guy is worthy of the number one pick. After that, those two guys are clearly, the guys that are the firmest in that conversation for the number one pick, but they're not the only guys that are there. And at 3, it's Jaden Hardy, who plays for the G League Ignite, a 6'4", 190-pound guard, 2 guard, but can play on the ball. has a 6'8.5" wingspan, and is just the scorer. Got off to actually a rocky start in his G League Ignite debut. Only had 12 points, went 4 for 14, shooting 0 for 5 from 3, which wasn't great. But one of the things he's trying to do in the G League is burnish his credentials as a point guard. He did have 6 assists. And he shows some ball handling abilities. I'm not worried overall about his potential to score the basketball. I think he is maybe the most elite perimeter scorer in this draft right now. He's going to put up big numbers, I think, over time. And, the comparisons are obviously going to come in between him and Jalen Green. And Jalen Green, to me, is definitely more of an explosive athlete than Jaden Hardy is. Jaden Hardy doesn't jump out of the gym and explode the way that Jalen Green does. But on the other hand, I think Hardy actually brings a little bit more to the table as far as versatility goes, the ability to play on the ball as a point guard, and maybe gives a little bit more on the defensive end as well. And so I really like Jaden Hardy, and I think that his shot at being a potential number 1 pick is likely going to be tied to who ends up getting the number 1 pick in the draft. If they're a team that's looking at all for a guard and feels really set in their front court, Hardy is probably going to be the best option that they have. And again, all the other sort of competition are all sort of 4-5s, and they'll all be sort of competing against each other. But I'm not really sure who Hardy's big contender is as far as the best guard in this draft goes right now. So I think there's a legitimate shot, again, if a team like maybe New Orleans gets the number 1 pick in the draft, he would be a really intriguing option. At number 4, it's Jaylen Durin, the Memphis freshman, big man center who reclassified this year. One of the younger players in the draft, will be 18 and a half on draft night. 6'11", 250 pounds, 7'5" wingspan. So here's another guy already built out, even at his young age, as an NBA player. He's got an NBA body, good athlete, dunks everything, loves to attack the rim, can really run the floor well. He's shown some real passing acumen as well, which I think will be a big thing for him and be a big part of determining ultimately where he goes in the draft. Some of the teams really like him and saw him at the Memphis Pro Day and, think that given his body and his strength that he's going to have a big impact in the NBA. Other teams are like, he's a little bit too much of a traditional NBA big man. He doesn't really stretch the floor. He tries to do some other things away from the basket, but that's clearly not his strength at this point. Is some questions about his motor a little bit, though overall the people were pretty positive, at least about what he did for Memphis during Pro Day. And so this is going to be a guy that, look, if it was a decade ago and we were talking about, the old NBA draft, where would he be? He probably is going to be a guy that I think Durin would have been a number 1 pick in the draft 15 years ago. But now I think he's a little bit on the outside looking in. Again, Banchero and Holmgren are more skilled than he is. Banchero has that sort of similar big body, doesn't have the length of Durin and not quite the athleticism that Durin has. But I think the skill set probably wins out in the modern NBA. And so he's a little bit lower on the board. At number 5, this guy has already been rising over the summer, a guy that really helped himself out in the pro days, and that's Auburn's Jabari Smith Jr., another freshman, power forward, 6'10", 210 pounds, 7'1" wing, and a guy that, again, versatility is the name of the game, can defend multiple positions, has the mobility to guard 5s, 4s, 3s, has the shooting potential to stretch the floor, which is something NBA teams are always really interested in. He's raw. He's one of the younger prospects in this draft, and he's going to be more of a potential than a production guy early on. But I think that ultimately people are going to feel really rewarded with him. He's going to be like the Patrick Williams, I think, of this draft, in that, he probably isn't going to put up the same numbers that we're going to see from Hardy or Durin or Banchero, or Holmgren. But there's going to be that intriguing upside that he brings to the table. Every scout that I talked to that saw him in Auburn was really impressed by him and thought if he has a big year, I think they're thinking he's going to have a more sort of moderate year. But if he has a big year, then he could definitely enter the conversation for the number one pick. It's going to be tough because I'm just not sure the role that he's going to play in Auburn and the talent that's actually there. And there's a lot of talent on this Auburn team this year. I think they're going to be one of the best teams in the country. Whether he's going to be able to get the minutes and the role that he needs to make that case for himself, but the upside factor is there. And we've seen teams in the last few drafts with the fourth pick. For example, Patrick Williams with the Bulls or Scotty Barnes with the Raptors, swing for the high upside, high ceiling type of player there. And Jabari Smith certainly is that guy. All right. That's the top 5 guys on Big Board 1.0. When we come back, we're going to talk about the rest of the top 10, picks 6 through 10 on my first Big Board of the year, Big Board 1.0. But before we do so, I want to talk to you about McDonald's. This episode of NBA Big Board is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's a place where friends and family can come to reconnect, a place where classmates can meet up for a study group, knowing that they'll have dependable Wi-Fi and endless supplies of French fries and McFlurries. Win or lose, it's a place where teammates, competitors, the home team or the away team can come to recharge. It's the place you always look forward to stopping at on a long road trip, rest your legs and refuel. I'm personally crazy about the McRib, and it's McRib season again, so I'm pretty stoked. I've already been to McDonald's several times, feasting on the McRib 2 to 3 times a week when it's McRib season. That's the Kansas City guy in me looking for barbecue, and yeah, that's not traditional Kansas City barbecue, but man, I love the McRib. So head down to your local McDonald's to refuel and connect. Did somebody say NBA Big Board watch party? I'm loving it. It's McDonald's. Also want to talk to you about another one of our sponsors, Calm. When it comes to athletes, we tend to focus on physical fitness, but there's another side of the game that's just as important, mental fitness. Calm, the number one app for sleep and meditation, has teamed up with LeBron James to help you train your mind and become the champion version of yourself. LeBron and Calm know that your mind is like any muscle in your body, but you don't have to be a world champion to learn how to train it. Calm can help you train your brain so you sleep better, reduce your stress, perform at your best, just like King James. I love this app. I use it all the time. I'm a big believer in mindfulness and preparing yourself mentally before you go in and do big tasks like putting on a podcast. And sleep is a big part of that. For LeBron, he talks about that, and this is a quote from LeBron, getting good sleep and finding time to rest is one of the most valuable things I can do with my body and mind. From the sound of rain falling or leaves to bedtime sleep stories, Calm puts me to sleep within minutes, which means I wake up ready for any challenge, unquote. That's LeBron James. If you head over to calm.com/lockedonnba, for a limited time, we'll give you 40% off a Calm Premium prescription. There's so much there to like. There's sounds of rain, of leaves, of sleep stories, meditations, just about anything that you can think of for a challenge in your life. Again, for a limited time, our listeners can join LeBron James in using Calm and getting a 40% discount on a Calm Premium prescription at calm.com locked on NBA. That's calm.com/locked on NBA. Unlock content to help you focus, ease stress, and sleep better. Get started at calm.com/locked on NBA. That's calm.com/locked on NBA. And we are back. The NBA Big Board, first Big Board of the 2022 NBA Draft. College basketball season starts on Tuesday, November 9th. I'm excited. The Champions Classic is going to kick off. We're going to see Duke and Kentucky, Michigan State, Kansas, a number of other top teams playing as well. And so I've been talking to NBA scouts really all summer. They've been out at practices. They've been out watching pro days and really trying to get their consensus of who they think the best prospects are going to be in the 2022 NBA draft. You can read the entire big board over at my website, nbabigboard.com. If you subscribe today, we got a special going on right now, 25% off and you get full access to the big board and all the other columns. We're going to be doing stock watches. We're going to be doing rookie watches. So many good things. Scouting reports are going to be in there as well. If you want to be following the NBA draft, I really think it's the best way to follow it. And you can do all of that over at NBABigBoard.com today. Hope you become a subscriber. College basketball season equals the NBA draft season. And so we're really excited to get started. So we've started. I've given away the top 5 guys on Big Board 1.0. I'm also going to talk about players 6 through 10 on Big Board 1.0 right now. And it starts with Caleb Houston, the Michigan freshman. He's a wing, 6'8", 205. A guy, Houston hails out of Canada. He was actually pretty good for Team Canada in the under-19s, had some really encouraging play there. He's not the sexiest prospect. He's more one of these guys that just gets it done on the offensive end, gets it done on the defensive end. He's not going to look to drop 30 on you every night, but he impacts the game in all the right ways as a scorer, as a passer, as a versatile defender. He just sees the game in a way that scouts really think is eventually going to help his play really pop. I really like this guy, just a highly intelligent basketball player that really understands the game and knows how to play the game. And he plays the most important position in the NBA as a wing. And that's a big deal for NBA scouts. So certainly something to watch there at Michigan at 6. At number 7, it's Jaden Ivey, the Purdue sophomore shooting guard, the first college upperclassman, in other words, not non-college freshman, to make our list. And interestingly, the only one in our lottery at this point. This lottery is heavily dominated by college freshmen, G League Ignite, Overtime Elite, and international prospects this year. So only one returning college player, Jaden Ivey, cracks the lottery, and there's only a small handful that actually crack the top 30 this year. And he's one of the players that I'm really intrigued with. He was awesome for Team USA in the under-19 FIBA championship runs. He's a great athlete. He's an electric driver to the basket, plays with toughness, motor, plays in attack mode, really came on towards the end of his freshman season there at Purdue. I think he built on that in that Team USA championship run that he had. And he's really got one big question mark is what is he going to be as a three-point shooter? If he can get that three-point shooting percentage up to 35 to 38%, he's a big time prospect because he is just absolutely everything else that you're looking for in an NBA 2-guard scorer and defender. And so shooting is going to be the big question. And, scouts saw him in high school and thought he was a pretty good shooter. Not sure what really happened during his freshman year at Purdue, where he struggled from the 3-point line. He also did struggle for Team USA again in limited minutes and on a limited schedule in the under 19 FIBA championships here. But if that's the thing that he can actually sort of nail at the next level, I think Ivey is a guy who could even creep into the conversation for the number 1 pick in the draft and be the one guy I think that could actually really challenge Jaden Hardy if he gets that jump shot going. But that's a big if right now, and that's the thing we'll be watching him carefully for. At number 8, it's Patrick Baldwin Jr., another freshman. This guy, 6'9", 220, 6'11 wing, maybe just one of the best perimeter players in this draft, guy that can really shoot the basketball at 6'9" and has the sort of size and length to be able to shoot over defenders. Interestingly, going to one of those blue chip colleges to play for his dad at Milwaukee. So, he's in the Horizon League. He's not going to be playing against elite competition, which may hurt his stock a little bit. He's also not like an elite or particularly explosive athlete, but he has just a beautiful stroke. He can really shoot the basketball, and this is going to be his calling card to the NBA. And if he really is sinking, threes at a high percentage this year, it's going to be kind of Corey Kispert all over again. Where do you draft a guy who just is a lights out shooter? And the only difference here is that Baldwin will be 19 on draft night, not 22 like Kispert. And so again, somebody that I'm really looking forward to seeing this year. Will be a little bit harder to scout him than some of the other guys because of where he's playing, but certainly an intriguing prospect. At number 9, it's Yannick Zosa, the The big man from the Congo who's playing in Spain right now from Malaga, 6'11", 215, 7'6" wingspan. Watching him as a 17-year-old, he looked like he could become an all NBA defensive team player, maybe even a guy that could win Defensive Player of the Year at some point. Prospect. I mean, that's what he looked like at a 17-year-old playing in the highest league in Europe for the Spanish team this year. Really loved him. His offense, he really runs the floor hard. He can kind of finish around the basket, but overall, I would call his offense awkward. There was just it clearly doesn't come naturally to him the same way that playing defense comes naturally to him, and you knew that was going to be the big issue for him early in the draft. He's actually struggled in his current season over in Spain right now, averaging just 2 points, 2 rebounds a game, and about 13 minutes a game in his first 8 games. That's a big disappointment. Michael Eric, an American veteran, has kind of come over and taken over his role, kind of digging into Zosa's role to a certain extent. I'm not sure what's really going on with him. It's certainly been a discouraging start for him. I think scouts were hoping to see big things from him this year. There was a lot of buzz from international scouts that I talked to early in this draft who told me this guy has a real shot at being the number 1 pick in the draft. For the first 8 games, it's been a bit of a disaster. And if that continues, he could see a significant slip, and to the point that, maybe he's got to come back and look at the 2023 NBA draft. Hoping he turns it around. All of his teammates think he's great. I've talked to some folks over there that have played with him, coaches that have coached him. They all love him. He's got an incredible story, but he's going to have to produce over in Spain right now if he's going to crack the top 10 or certainly be a higher candidate. And right now, he's just not there. At number 10, Osmani Ding, who's from France but playing for the New Zealand Breakers this year. 6'9", 185 pounds, 7'1" wing, one of the most skilled and intriguing players in this draft for me personally. I really love him. I think that he's a tremendous prospect. I also not sure where exactly to slate him. I could have put him higher. I certainly could have put him lower. He's playing in the Australian NBL this year, and the track record of guys coming over that are not from Australia and having big years there is pretty rocky. He's actually going to play for the same team that RJ Hampton went over and played for, the New Zealand Breakers, and that was pretty much a disaster for RJ. Really hurt his draft stock, and he's going to need a big year to really get into the top 10. But the talent is there. Some of the scouts that saw him this summer said he reminds them of a young Paul George. He's only 185 pounds. He needs to put on strength, but the ball handling ability, the ability to guard and defend multiple positions. He is your modern day wing who can pass, can shoot, can do just about everything. Will he get the chance to do that for the New Zealand Breakers? I think it was an interesting decision for him to decide to leave France and go play there. I'm not sure that it'll pay off. We'll see. It's a pretty physical league, and he is very thin. I really like him as a prospect. I think if teams are patient, it will pay off for them. But the early returns on him, it's just hard to know whether he's going to put up the sort of numbers that are going to allow him to stay this high in the draft. But I will say that based off of the preliminary reports talking from NBA scouts, he was actually over in California for a while playing this summer. They really, really like him. All right, that's the top 10 of Big Board 1.0, first big board of the 2022 NBA draft. You can read all about it over at NBABigBoard.com. When we return, I'm going to talk about a few other highlights from Big Board 1.0. But before I do so, it would not be an NBA Big Board podcast if we didn't talk about our longtime sponsor, my favorite, Built Bar. So many delicious flavors. There's something for everyone. When we talk to a Built Bar fan, they're definitely passionate about their faves. If you don't know the Built Bar flavors, well, you're missing out. There's coconut, there's cherry barcia, there's raspberry, there's mint brownie, there's double chocolate, there's salted caramel, there's strawberry, there's orange, there's cookies and creams, there's German chocolate. My personal favorite, longtime listeners know I love the coconut. Tastes like a Mounds bar. It's chewy. It's sweet. It tastes like a candy bar, not like a protein bar, but actually are really healthy for you too. 17 to 18 grams of protein, calories ranging from 130 to 180 calories, only 4 to 5 grams of sugar, only 4 to 5 grams of net carbs. Order today and get the grasshopper cookie or raspberry, whatever you like. BuiltBar.com is also the official protein bar of the U.S. track and field team. Go to BuiltBar.com, use promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your first order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. All right, and we're back talking 2022 Big Board 1.0. You can read all about it over on my website and newsletter, NBABigBoard.com. Got a subscription special going on right now in honor of the start of the college basketball season. Get 25% off. That works out to about $525 a month or $52.50 a year. I really think that you're going to enjoy all the NBA content and draft content that's coming out. I'm following rookies, I'm following sophomores all year, but I'm also going to be deeply now diving into the NBA draft, and we'll have stock watch reports every week. We'll be following these prospects both here and in the Overtime Elite and the G League Ignite, as well as the international prospects all year long. If you want to get into the draft right now, I think now's the big time, and especially if you are an Oklahoma City Thunder fan, or if you're an Orlando Magic fan, or if you're a Detroit Pistons fan right now, and the San Antonio Spurs fan right now, it's probably time to already start thinking about who are we going to add to this team in 2022. Well, I want to wrap up. I'm not giving away the whole big board today on the podcast. You're going to have to go over and subscribe to NBABigBoard.com if you want to hear the entire big board right now. But there's a couple of other prospects that I want to talk about that I'm really interested in. At 14, Gene Montero plays for Overtime Elite, comes via Dominican Republic, then plays in Spain last year. This is a unique league. I'm not exactly sure what to do with it yet because most of the prospects that Montero playing against are really high-level high school basketball players, but usually a year or even 2 years behind Montero right now. So going to the G League Ignite gets you playing against NBA prospects and college veterans, and going to the Overtime Elite actually is sort of playing down to younger competition. But he is such an intriguing player because of his ability to get a shot from anywhere on the floor. He's just an electric offensive player, can really stroke the three. And one of the things that he's trying to prove to NBA scouts right now is that he can play point guard. He measured 6'2", 180 with only a 6'4" wing. So he's definitely on the small end if he's going to just be a two guard. So they're going to put the ball in his hands all year, try to show him off as a playmaker. He recorded almost a triple-double in his opening debut, 19 points, 10 rebounds, 9 assists, 4 steals, was 5 for 11 from three-point range. Just to me, one of the most electric players in the draft. I'm very, very intrigued by him at 14, and a guy that will also be the hardest to place on our big board because the level of competition, there's no gauge for it. We haven't really seen this model before. It's essentially like he's coming out of high school or maybe like AAU where he's playing against some of the top prospects every night. But people in general are bullish. The people that went over and watched Overtime Elite Pro Day came back really impressed with him. I'm really intrigued with him as well. It may be in workouts that he finally has to kind of go up against these other top prospects because he's just not really playing with them right now at the Overtime Elite, but certainly somebody that I'm really intrigued in. I'm also intrigued by Kentucky's players this year. And, it used to be when I covered the draft, like Kentucky dominated the top of the draft. In the last few years, that just really hasn't really been the case for John Calipari's recruiting classes, even though sometimes those guys have gone on to play actually really well in the NBA. And even though they weren't maybe as highly ranked sort of coming in. And so there's 2 freshmen that I'm really intrigued with on Kentucky right now. They also had a pro day. A lot of NBA teams came to that pro day and came away talking about Ty Washington, freshman point guard, 6'3", has a 6'9" wingspan, shoots the lights out, heady playmaker, a guy that they think is actually going to be able to break into the starting lineup, despite the fact that Kentucky kind of loaded up on veteran transfers this year, and so has a little bit older roster than they typically have had in the past. I don't think he's going to start at point guard for Kentucky because Severe Wheeler, I think at 5'9", is probably going to have to sort of play that position. But this is a guy that sometimes draws some comparisons to Emmanuel Quickly and what he does. Shooting comes at a premium in the draft, and people were really impressed with him early on. His teammate to me might be the single most intriguing prospect for me in this class. I had no idea where to put him on my big board. He ends up at 17, and scouts said essentially the same thing to me. He has top 5 talent, And it feels unlikely that he's going to totally show that off as a freshman at Kentucky this year. And that's Damian Collins, a power forward. He's 6'9", 205, has a 7'5" wingspan, and is one of the most explosive athletes you're going to see in this draft or any draft. He just jumps out of the gym, kind of some Greg Brown-esque sort of comparisons out of him. Greg Brown just really wasn't ready for the pros, but the athletic tools were there. He's been wowing people in practice. His teammates say that he can regularly touch the top of the backboard when he jumps. He's actually not a terrible basketball player. He can shoot the basketball a little bit. He can handle a little bit. He's just thin. He didn't play against the high level of competition in high school, and it's more likely that he's going to be coming off the bench for Kentucky than having sort of a dominant starting role. I don't know that we'll see big numbers from him this year, but if you're talking about an electric athletic package with just some special abilities for a player, Damian Collins to me is one of the most intriguing guys, and it'll be really interesting to see how teams bite on his upside, even if he doesn't come in and have a dominant year at Kentucky, which I think is kind of what we're expecting at this point. There isn't a lot of other returning college basketball players to really talk about right now. Benedict Mathurin is 18 on my list. So he's one. Jabari Walker, a guy that really had his coming out party against Georgetown in the NCAA tournament with 24 points and 2 blocks and 5 for 5 from 3 out of Colorado, has some intrigue as well. Certainly Keegan Murray out of Iowa makes the list at 26. And at 28, Jaime Hawkes Jr., the UCLA wing, interestingly, getting a little bit more love from NBA scouts than Johnny Juzang, who got all the buzz from the NCAA tournament run. This UCLA team is going to be really interesting to see between Hawkes, Johnny Juzang, and another guy who is a freshman who is really intriguing, Peyton Watson, who's a big 6'8" wing who can handle the ball and do just about everything as well, but likely coming off the bench for UCLA. He actually ranks the highest at 13 of those UCLA prospects, but a guy that's just really intriguing as well. I finally want to talk about the couple of international players that will likely be cracking our big board. Nikola Yovich, not Jokic, Yovich, who plays for Mega Basket in Serbia, one of the most skilled players of the international prospect, but somehow a deeply polarizing prospect, not off to a great start for Mega Basket as well. He's got to become a better shooter, I think. Teams are all over the place about where he should ultimately be drafted. I have him right now at 23, but there are some teams that have him in the late lottery, which I think is really interesting. Dyson Daniels is actually playing for the G League, but he comes, via Australia. Roko Perkison comes from Sabona via Lithuania last year, entered the draft last year, then removed his name when it wasn't clear that he was going to be a number 1 pick in the draft. He's certainly an interesting prospect. And then my sleeper, this guy I put at 30. And he wasn't strongly on my radar screen before Memphis's pro day, when a number of scouts that I really trust, that typically are right about these type of prospects, said Josh Minot is a guy that you just have to go watch. And, he's another wing, 6'8", 205, 6'11". He's going to be eclipsed probably all year by Jaylen Durin and Amani Bates, who are on that roster as well. Measured a 38.5-inch vertical jump at the Memphis Pro Day. And again, it just has all of those typical wing skills, a little bit of ball handling, can defend multiple positions, can shoot the basketball that NBA teams really like. Not sure if this is his year or not, but he was just one guy that consistently, from the guys that I really trust, that came away from this, people saying, man, this guy could be really talented. Well, there's a lot more to dig into over at Big Board 1.0. If you want, you can head over to NBABigBoard.com right now. Subscribe today. There's a 25% offer right now, and you can dig into all the top 30. There's player cards available. You can also look at my top 12 returning college basketball players, top 12 freshmen, top 12 international players. Also, look at the G League. I'm doing a stock watch every week on Tuesdays, where we'll come in and look at which players are trending in a positive direction, which players are struggling a little bit. We'll keep catching up on the rookies in this fantastic 2021 rookie class as well. All of that available to you over at NBABigBoard.com. Until next week, you've been listening to Chad Ford's NBA Big Board on the Locked On Podcast Network. Aloha.